Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and welcome to the Great League Fantasy Cup. This is a 1500 combat power format where only Dragon, Fairy, and Steel-type Pokemon are allowed. And this meta looks very different to the last time it was here. Now the meta is run by the new Great League eligible Pokemon, Giratina Origin. A great team that you can use with Great League Giratina Origin is going to be Empoleon lead, Shadow Flygon as the save switch, and the Giratina as the closer. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's check out Great League Giratina Origin dominating in the Fantasy Cup. Hopping into the first match, leading Empoleon into Goodra. This is a pretty okay lead for the Empoleon. Do of course have to be mindful of a potential Thunder Punch. I'm going to fire off the Drill Peck, it's going to connect. I throw two Steel Wings, wait the turn, and get the catch onto the Flygon. Tell me this is the Thunder Punch, and it is. We get the triple resistant catch. Unfortunately, my happiness is short-lived as in comes a Powder Snow Alolan Sandslash to absolutely shred through the Flygon, but Flygon still able to force a shield with the Scorching Sands. In comes Empoleon. Opponent lost track of Empoleon's residual energy and accidentally plays to a CMP tie that they do not win. I am going to be shielding in this matchup because I need to get rid of the Alolan Sandslash so that way I can sweep with Giratina in the back. That's the goal of the team. It's a very standard Steel Double Dragon team where you try and bait out their best response to the Giratina. Here, I'm going to go for the Hydro Cannon, and the opponent says one good catch deserves another, catching the Hydro onto Goodra. That is a bit of a complicating factor. Are they going to be sending back in the Sandslash, or do we see the final Pokemon? They bring in Empoleon. Here, I'm going to farm up. I should have banked the Hydro before switching and send in Giratina. Banking the Hydro would have guaranteed the win. But unfortunately, I don't bank it, which may complicate things if my opponent is able to farm down. But Giratina tanks the Drill Peck, knocks out with the Shadow Ball, farms down the Sandslash, and even though I don't feel like I played amazingly, Giratina is just too good in this meta. Tough lead in the next match, Empoleon vs Shadow Flygon. I farm up to the Hydro Cannon and switch out into my own Flygon as they make it to the Scorching Sands. The Scorching Sands nearly one-hit KOs by Flygon, so unfortunately I basically just accidentally throw away the whole Flygon. But honestly, this is still not bad. The Empoleon Giratina core is absolutely broken in this format. There's realistically almost nothing that can actually break it. There's a couple things if you look on PvPoke, like it says Alolan Sandslash, but realistically they have to bait to beat Empoleon. They also say stuff like Dedenne, but Dedenne, Empoleon and Giratina both still have win cons there. Opponent is going to send in Ferrothorn. I'm going to farm up, attempt to go for a catch onto Giratina. If they have Flash Cannon, they can hit me with it. I'm not going to shield, but they don't. They have Power Whip. So this works out pretty nicely for me. And now I just get to showcase the power of Giratina Origin. Tanking the two Power Whips, I'm going to look to massively overfarm and fire off the Ominous Wind. I farm them into a range where I can knock them out with the cheaper Ominous Wind. The Ominous Wind plus a Shadow Claw will be enough to pick up that knockout. And now what are they going to be sending in? I have a lot of energy on my Giratina. They send in Skarmory, and this is just a win. Empoleon can just win this game for me. The Shadow Ball will connect. I bring in the Empoleon, and Empoleon is going to be able to just output a ton of pressure onto the Skarmory. Hydro Cannon is going to get the shield. Skarmory forced to throw as I was almost at another Hydro. So I will commit the shield and look to farm. When they eventually switch into Flygon, which they do, I just get to say no. Fire off the Hydro Cannon, not today Flygon, and their Skarmory is not going to be able to outpace the Empoleon. And that right there showcases the power of this core. I basically threw away my whole Shadow Flygon, and it was still a win because this core is just too good in this meta. We've got a decent lead in the next match, Empoleon vs Shadow Alolan Sandslash. We do pace identically here. I make the Hydro Cannon when they make the Drill Run, but of course Empoleon will win that Charge Attack priority tie. They commit the shield, I'm definitely shielding back. Even if it is a bait, the Steel Wing damage here is very valuable. It's just like that, they're below half HP thanks to the Steel Wings. They make a very nice catch onto their own Giratina Origin, catching the Hydro Cannon. I'm going to throw two Steel Wings and switch, so this way I'm still able to outpace with the Flygon and make the Dragon Claw one turn before they make it to that Shadow Ball. So this Dragon Claw will force a shield from the opponent. They're going to actually commit the shield, and I decide that I'm going to shield back. Even though I know that they have a Sandslash with a move, them throwing the move from the Sandslash would honestly be great for me, because that way then I can bring back in the Empoleon and I'll be up energy. So I'm going to overfarm, knock them out with the Dragon Claw, They're not going to send in the Sand Slash. Instead, in comes Tapu Fini, and Shadow Flygon is about to go on a rampage. Shadow Flygon lands the Scorching Sands. That does a ton of damage. Beautiful play by my opponent to snipe as I make it to the charge move. But at this point, I'm in the driver's seat of this match. They're going to be firing off the Ice Punch. I can tank that, and when they get to their next Ice Punch, I'm going to switch and catch it onto the Empoleon. Again, one good catch, definitely deserves another, and now I just get to Steel Wing farm down, and there's no winning the game for the Tapu Fini, as Tapu Fini is going to get knocked out with the Drill Peck. So even though PB Poke claims Alolan Sand Slash is a core breaker to this core, honestly, in my view, it really isn't. Empoleon versus Giratina. Again, if you're going to be switching out into the Flygon, you want to do 2 Steel Wings in the switch, so this way you're able to outpace. I fire off the Claw, opponent commits the Shield, they're farming up a ton of energy, and they're firing off the move. I will commit the Shield, opponent is going to bait with the Ominous Wind, I'm farming up, I go for the Dragon Claw, but my opponent reads me like a book with a perfect catch onto Weezing. Weezing, a Pokemon that even though it's a Fairy type into a Dragon, definitely does not appreciate these Scorching Sands. So I fire off the Scorching Sands, I get the Shield and the attack drop, opponent tries for the farm down, but thanks to the attack drop, Shadow Flygon makes the Scorching Sands, knocking out the Weezing and winning switch advantage, and now Giratina is here to completely shut down Registeel. One of the things I love about Giratina in this cup is just the insane neutral play that Ghost Damage has. Even among some of the more staple picks in this meta, like stuff like Registeel and Azumarill, you can still hit them for very consistent neutral damage across the board with Ghost Damage. So even if you're a Dragon type like Giratina against a Fairy type Azumarill, up a shield, you can just simply win that. And now I'm in a position where I have a move on my Giratina, so this game is over. Even if they're able to get the world's most perfect undercharge and somehow exit with a move, it's just not going to be enough to win the game because the Hydro does put them into Shadow Ball range. They go for the Focus Blast, they do get an undercharge, but it's not enough, and I just have the Shadow Ball ready and waiting to go on the Giratina. So we're going to be able to take the win again. Opponent with a very similar idea there. The Giratina plus Steel Core is very, very strong. What do you know? Same lead in the next match. This time I accidentally overtap, and instead of throwing 2 and switching, I throw 3 and switching. But this is a good example to showcase what goes wrong if you do 2 in the move. Opponent is going to send out a Scavalier. A Scavalier is very glassy. I debated baiting. I decided against it, but it's an Escavalier. They're going to shield. They're so glassy. So I could have successfully baited them there and forced both shields, but unfortunately I didn't. And now I'm going to bring in Giratina. Giratina does do quite well here. I'm going to tank a Drill Run and then look to Shadow Claw them into a range where I can Ominous Wind. Again, the goal with the Giratina is always to be over farming because this energy goes everywhere in this cup. It's basically only really something like a Guzzlord or a Drampa that would be a wall to this energy. So I'm able to get that farm down. In the back, it's Registeel, and things are looking pretty good for me. I'm going to start launching these Shadow Balls. Shadow Ball number 1 will connect to the Registeel, trying to make it to another. There, I accidentally overtap again, and this is going to force a shield as they go for the Zap Cannon. And I'm honestly at this point, I can probably just Ominous Wind. The Ominous Wind, if it doesn't KO, it'll leave him at 1 HP. They are barely able to survive it. And now I'm firing off an Ominous Wind at the Giratina. They're forced to respect the Shadow Ball. I switch into Empoleon, and Empoleon takes a lot from Shadow Ball, but I'm not in a range where Shadow Ball will quite KO. I'm running a very high rank Empoleon. They're trying to Shadow Claw me into a range where Shadow Ball will KO. Shadow Ball will barely knock out from here, but unfortunately they're just too low where my Giratina farms down theirs, and the Registeel, and by the narrowest of margins, I take the win. Tough lead in the next match, leading Empoleon into Registeel. I safe switch into Shadow Flygon, and my opponent responds with their own. Dragon Claw nearly picks up the one-hit KO. The Flygon mirror is always a very short-lived one, because if a move lands, it's probably coming close to KOing. Here, I get a massive farm down. In the back is Weezing, and Flygon is just going to be able to take over this game. My opponent did not have a response to an energy advantage Flygon. I get the Dragon Claw bait as well, and we are cooking. Scorching Sands forces the final shield. Opponent, here I miscounted. I thought they were 1 short of the back-to-back, so I decided to shield. I shouldn't have shielded. Turns out they were at the back-to-back. I was thinking, you know what? I could maybe try for a Shadow Flygon 1v3, but unfortunately I miscounted. Good news is I'm still just in a completely one position, because this Empoleon Giratina core in alignment is basically just unbeatable. As I mentioned, the Zap Cannon will connect. Zap Cannon does actually get the debuff onto the Giratina, but Giratina does not mind. Going to be able to fire off the Shadow Ball. This Shadow Ball damage is debuffed, but it definitely does not look it. They're making it to another move, but again, this will not be enough to knock out. The Zap Cannon will get me low. I'm still going to be able to fire off this Shadow Ball. The Shadow Ball is going to mean game over for the Reggie. I tried to undercharge to leave them at 1 HP to deny the Weezing farm, but Empoleon's not in a range where one move would KO regardless. Weezing's a Pokemon that, honestly, there is probably unlimited amount of potential moveset options you can run in this cup. Sludge, Brutal Swing, Play Rough, Overheat are all extremely viable. We see a very familiar face on the lead in the next match, Empoleon versus Giratina. Again, the Flygon safe switch. And they're not switching out, so I'm going to apply some pressure here with the Dragon Claw. The Dragon Claw is going to be shielded. They're farming up a ton of energy with the Giratina, and they get the catch onto Skarmory. Skarmory is really the biggest nuisance for safe-switching Flygon, as if they switch in a Skarmory, unfortunately your energy is just walled. You're stuck throwing resisted moves, and these Steel Wings are absolutely going to tear you to shreds. So my opponent, my guess is they wanted to catch the first one, but since we were desynced by a turn, they weren't quite able to, but they get the catch on the second one, and now I'm definitely on the back foot here. They have so much energy loaded on that Giratina. They have like 11 Shadow Claws of energy, so I don't really feel like I can commit a shield. So I let it go. It's the Brave Bird, and that just gets me too low. In the back, it's a Zoomeril. So, honestly, a team that overall my Giratina does very well against, but I let their Giratina get a massive, massive energy head start, and all that energy is still safe. They haven't thrown a single bit of that energy, so I'm in trouble. I'm forced to shield the Play Rough because it would just do too much damage, and now my opponent has a guaranteed win condition in this match as long as they don't bait, because they can just output too much damage here. I think my only hope is that they bait, so I am going to call it. They don't, it's the Shadow Ball, and unfortunately, I'm going to lose with a shield remaining. Tough lead in the next match, Empoleon versus a Escavalier. Immediate save switch to the Shadow Flygon, and in comes Galar Weezing. I'm farming up to the Scorching Sands, and I decide to go for a bait. Scorching Sands does a massive amount of damage here, and the bait is successful, and with the energy lead I have, this means that I now win the 1 shield and the 2 shield. They're 4 away, and I'm 4 away. And I have a 5 cycle coming up for Scorching Sands, and they're going to be back on their 5 cycle for Brutal Swing. So, the nice thing here, as I get an attack drop that I didn't necessarily need, I should now be in a winning position. I flipped switch, which means that Giratina will be on the Escavalier. So, I get to fire off the Scorching Sands. Scorching Sands is going to be able to pick up the knockout, and they're going to send back in Escavalier. Escavalier is unfortunately going to get the farm down before I make the Scorching Sands, but a Dragon Claw is still going to do a lot here. Escav is very, very glassy. In comes Giratina, and with Giratina, basically, most anything in the back I should be in a winning position against. So I'm going to farm up, go for the Ominous Wind, they catch onto Guzzlord, and this game is over. Empoleon has a great matchup into Guzzlord, so I'm going to switch into the Empoleon and just farm up a ton of energy. They're firing off a move, that's very okay. I should be able to throw 4 and the Drill Peck here, constantly over farming, but the thing that you may have noticed that I didn't notice is that this is not a Dragon Tail Guzzlord, it's Snarl. My opponent bringing out the big brain tech. I was on autopilot going off Dragon Tail counts. I wasn't even looking at the fast move there because I saw Guzzlord. Mentally, I was like, oh, it's Dragon Tail. And I lose an unlosable game because I wasn't paying attention enough to check that it was a Snarl Guzzlord. We move to the next match, looking for some serious redemption here, because my goodness, what a terrible end of the last game. Empoleon versus Berserker. I shield up, it is the close combat, and now I'm going to look to save switch into the Flygon. These mud shots are tearing through the opponent. I said in Flygon, it's answered with Shiinotic of all things, and this will be a very interesting battle. Astonish does a lot of fast move damage, but Shiinotic, the issue with it is that Astonish has terrible energy generation. So I'm going to commit the shield. They actually full send a Moonblast, so that works out very nicely for me. And I'm going for the Scorching Sands. This should come pretty close to knocking out here. The Scorching Sands is going to get them low. I'm going for the Dragon Claw. I want to force a shield or Wind Switch. I basically just need the Shiinotic off my screen. In the back, it's Empoleon. I'm not going to be able to make it to the Scorching Sands. I'm hoping my opponent potentially has lost count, and they have. They commit the shield, and that's quite nice for me. I send in the Giratina, they bring in Berserker. I farm up, switch, and get a catch onto the Empoleon, and it turns out they're running Play Rough on the Berserker. Berserker, much like Weezing's another Mon that has a massive amount of viable movesets in this meta. Unfortunately, I follow up the nice catch by immediately not knowing how much residual energy they had, but as long as they don't have Blizzard, this game is a win for me, because the Empoleon doesn't have a ton of energy, so I will go for the Shadow Ball. That does massive damage. This could only be a Drill Peck or a Hydro Cannon, and I survive both. They go for the Hydro Cannon. Drill Peck doesn't do much more than that, so even if they had the Drill Peck, it might have ended in a tie, but the good news is we are able to take the win. And we get a great lead in the final match, Empoleon versus Tapu Fini. The Registeel save switch. The safer counter switch is Giratina because I don't have the shield, but I just saw Steel and I brought in the Flygon. Flygon looking to massively farm up. I'm very close to the back-to-back Scorching Sands. One Shadow Scorching Sands will come very close to knocking out. I don't want to risk them making another move, so I'm just going to fire off the Dragon Claw just to guarantee the switch advantage. And now, if they send in the Tapu Fini, I can apply a lot of pressure here, but they don't. Instead, they send in Skarmory. I can't afford to stay in here. I know that my Empoleon is very good into their team, so I'm just going to switch in the Empoleon, because they're ABA weak. I can tank a move. Even if it's a Brave Bird, I'm going to be able to survive this. They only end up going for the Sky Attack, which is quite nice, and I'm looking to farm up some energy and now potentially knock them out with the Hydro. Looking to put pressure on their shields. The Hydro Cannon does get shielded. Empoleon, I'm still not in a range where Brave Bird will KO, so I let it go. They do go for the Brave Bird. I'm barely able to hang on, shout out that high rank Empoleon, and this Hydro Cannon will pick up the KO. All that's left is that Tapu Fini, and unfortunately for the Tapu Fini, there's just no way to win this game. The Shadow Claws from Giratina do too much damage, and they have a choice. Get KO'd by a Shadow Ball, or get KO'd by the Scorching Sands. They choose the Shadow Ball. Instead of staying in with the Tina, I decided to switch in and pick up the knockout with the double resisted Dragon Claw, and we're able to take the win. All in all, Giratina Origin is an absolute force to be reckoned with in the Great League Fantasy Cup meta. You can definitely win without it, but having it on your team is a pretty significant advantage due to the tremendous amount of neutral play that it provides, even going up against fairy types like Azumarill and Tapu Fini. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.